I'll just go back to the global financial crisis, and the world was in disarray and the financial markets were in turmoil. And just the way the regulators in various countries reacted to the fast evolving environment, which was extremely volatile and unprecedented, I think India stood out as far as that was concerned. The Indian regulators, specifically the Reserve Bank of India, the way they handled the crisis in those times, in those days, those are the sort of situations which perhaps one needs to guard against. And I think India came out relatively unscathed out of the crisis, whereas financial institutions in a lot of other countries suffered and literally got decimated. So on the whole, and I'm just taking that one example, but there are various examples in our financial history, where there have been financial crises in the most recent years, whether it was ILFS or DHFL, and a bunch of other situations. I think the way the regulator steps in and has handled situations, some may deem it to be very slow, some may deem it to be over-regulation, but I think in times like these, when there is stress in the economy, is when the true character of the socio-economic infrastructure comes out. And I think to that extent, over-regulation, be it as it may, is actually good, is actually okay to guard against these kind of situations. So I don't think India is over-regulated, but it's better to be erring on the side of caution. Well, clearly it's a regulated entity, so it's incumbent upon us as we are dealing with various stakeholders to be extremely ethical in our governance, in our standards, and clearly define first of all what ethics stand for. Are we honest as an organization? Are we catering to stakeholder requirements very, very transparently, and so on and so forth? And as my fellow panelist mentioned, it's extremely important to walk the talk. One is, of course, your code of conduct and ethics and what's right, what's wrong, and compliance governs that. And sometimes as an employee, one may feel that compliance intervention is actually slowing down processes and my ability to do business. But again, I would say that we as an organization, we're a 50-year-old plus organization. Now, if you look back into history, how many financial services organizations have existed for 50 plus years? So a lot of that has to do with, the foundation, the ethics, the governance standards, and literally walking the talk everywhere. And culture in an organization flows from the top, always, I believe that.
Correct.
And
Correct.
Unless you are imbibing those ethical standards, those involving people as you walk along and take decisions and being transparent about what's being done as a leader, I don't think you'll be able to keep the employees happy, or you would be able to keep investors happy. And hence transparency is incumbent and very integral to the ethical standards that you imbibe. See, I think when you're dealing with clients or customers, any client-facing organization, there will always be that level of subjectivity based on the person who's dealing with that particular client. Now, having said that, the more institutionalized your processes are, and going back to the point on how governance flows down and how ethical the standards are within the organization, the more institutionalized your processes are, the chances of error or your advice going wrong will be minimalistic. So how granularly, bottoms up, are you diligencing the various products that are coming in?
Right.
How you're making sure that diligence standards are set to a very, very high level, and there is maker-checker, there is a governance committee, and so on and so forth, to make sure that the product or the list of products that are going out into the market is pretty standardized across customers. Again, having said that, there is suitability of the client also, which is extremely important, and that's perhaps the first litmus test that you got to pass. Somebody may have a very aggressive portfolio versus somebody who's maybe very conservative. So again, how standardized you can make portfolios, how standardized you can make your recommendations, and making sure that the person facing the client, the relationship person, does not have the wherewithal to subservient or sort of bypass the advice, the sort of lingo that the organization wants you to talk is what it's all about. And sticking to those high standards. I mean, you look at the Tatas as a group,
Right.
150 years of ethics. What does it stand for? There may be another company which is bigger in India today, but what that 150 years of absolutely zero default stands for is that they will be the cheapest borrower in the country even today.
Perfect.
That's what it translates into. Sure, I think it's a fine balance that you need to adopt, especially being a listed company or a regulated entity, or irrespective for that matter. We have situations where, as a listed company, you may be considering an acquisition. And just going strictly by the letter of the law, there is a certain point of time that you need to disclose it to the stock exchanges as well. Now, it's not absolutely crystal clear at what stage you do it. So the law does not say when you sign the first term sheet or a draft of terms. So again, it depends. It's an exercise of your judgment on how you read it and what you think are fair and best practices. Because on one hand, if you keep on disclosing every single term sheet that you signed, which was non-binding, beyond a point of time, people will say 7-8 term sheets, nothing happening. They will form a certain perception about the company. On the other hand, where you've signed a binding term sheet, but you're still not disclosing it at the right stage to the market, that would cause havoc as well. So even while maintaining the balance, there is an exercise of judgment, there is an interpretation of law. You have cases where confidentiality agreements bind individual employees as well, even after they leave an organization.
Yes.
And in those cases, you make employees sign specific letters. So that's how stringently you need to impose some of these aspects in an organization. And on the flip side, there is this whole feeling that, there are organizations, and I've seen this, you send an NDA to them and they just sign it and send it back. There's not a single alteration because they believe or they feel that it's fine, sign whatever they want, because even if they were to invoke it or violate it, nothing will happen in India.